Hello class 9th, hope you all are good and concentrating in your studies. Students, still some of you are not regular with your assignments. So please be regular with your studies as well as your assignments. Now today in this video I am going to continue the same chapter in biology, that is the flower. And in this video we will discuss about the process of fertilization. Let's start the chapter, that is the flower. Successful pollination is followed by fertilization. And what is fertilization? It is a fusion of male gamete with female gametes. In angiosperms, that is your flowering plants, male gamete is your pollen grains and female gametes are your ovule, right? The pollen grains is transferred to the stigma to reach to the ovule for fertilization. Now let's see how these pollen grains reach to the stigma. When the pollen grains mature, they escape and reach to the stigma of the flower by pollination. The pollen grain is a microscopic and unicellular structure and it is covered by double wall. The outer wall is called exine, which is hard and thick, while inner wall is thin walled and is known as intine. The nucleus is divided into two nuclei. The one is called a tube nucleus and second one is called generative nucleus. The exine at certain places has pores and these pores is called germ pores, through which pollen tube emerges out during its germination. Next is the structure of a female gamete, that is your ovule. The ovule is a small structure present in the ovary and it is attached to the placenta by a stalk that is called funicle. So what is funicle? It is a filamentous stalk attaching the ovule to the placenta. Actually, the ovule is covered by two protective layers and these layers are called integuments. And then it bears a small opening and this opening is called micropyle in the surface of an ovule, through which the pollen tube penetrates. Now next is your nucellus. It is the central part of an ovule, surrounds the embryo sac. So what is embryo sac? The ovule contains a structure called embryo sac. The embryo sac has two ends. One is called chelicil end and second is called micropylar end, right? And each contains total 7 cells. What are these 7 cells? This is the central egg cell that is known as female gamete. It is guarded by two synergids. So these synergids are the part of the egg apparatus and they help in the pollen to reach the egg cell for fertilization. Two pollen nuclei which are fused to form the secondary nucleus present in the central cells. The three antipodal cells are present opposite to the micropylar end, that is in the chelicil end. These antipodal cells are rich in lipids, so these are known as nutritional centers. Now next is your events in fertilization. During fertilization, a number of events takes place which are summarized as follows. Now first is your germination of the pollen grains. The pollen grains after pollination are deposited on the stigma and then they absorb nutrients, that is your water and sugar secreted by the stigma, and swell up and then growth of pollen tube stimulated. The intine of pollen grains, they grows out as a pollen tube and passes through the style. The tissues of the style are dissolved with the help of enzymes secreted at the tip of pollen tube. Now next is your entry of pollen tube into the ovule. and finally the pollen tube travels down the whole length of the style into the ovary. Meanwhile, the generative nucleus divides into two male gametes or two nuclei. The male gametes move to the tip of the pollen tube and lie in the mass of cytoplasm. The tube nucleus degenerates the pollen grain with the pollen tube containing two male gametes. They constitute the mature male gametophyte. The pollen tube carrying the two male gametes now turns towards the micropyle and enters the embryo sac. Now tip of the pollen tube dissolves. Now next is your entry of pollen tube into the embryo sac. The pollen tube reaches the embryo sac passing through the ovule. And the two male gametes are discharged from the pollen tube into the embryo sac. One of the two male gametes fuse with the egg cell and forms a fertilized egg or zygote. And the second male gamete fuses with the secondary nucleus, that is your definite nucleus, and it forms the endosperm nucleus. The secondary nucleus is formed by the fusion of polar nuclei. The zygote develops into an embryo, whereas the endosperm nucleus develops into endosperm. And the endosperm provides nourishment to the developing embryo. Next is your double fertilization and triple fusion. What is double fertilization? Double fertilization means when fertilization occurs twice. This is actually structure of an embryo sac which contains the egg cell surrounded by the synergids and antipodal cells on the opposite sides, while the polar nuclei lies in the center. So out of the two male nuclei, one of the sperm nucleus fuses with the egg nucleus and that forms the zygote. Then the zygote develops into the embryo. That means the egg cell, which contains one set of chromosomes, that is N, fuses with the male gamete, which also contains one set of chromosomes. So the zygote contains diploid cell, that is, it contains 2n number of chromosomes. Whereas another sperm nucleus that fuses with polar nuclei to form endosperm. So in this case, the secondary nucleus, which contains 2n number of chromosomes, that fuses with the male gamete, which contains n number of chromosomes. So the endosperm, which contains 3n number of chromosomes, is formed. In this way, three haploid nuclei are fused and the process is known as triple fusion. Next is your fate of floral parts after fertilization. After fertilization, the flower has served its purpose. As you know that what is the main function of non-essential parts of the flower? That is your petals and calyx. They only attract the insects for pollination. Now so pollination is done now and fertilization is also done. Then what's happened with these non-essential parts of the flower? Actually the petals, stamens, style and stigma, they wither and generally they fall off, while the calyx may either fall off or may remain intact in a dried or a shriveled form. I think all of you have seen the brinjal and tomato, in which what's happened, this calyx persist with the fruit, right? And the ovary, it enlarge to form fruit, while the ovarian wall forms the fruit wall and the ovules become the seed. And the funiculus form the stalk of a seed, while outer integument forms the outer layer of the seed coat, that is your testa. Inner integument forms the inner layer of the seed coat, that is your tegmen. And secondary nucleus form endosperm, while egg cell form embryo, and synergids and antipodal cells, they disorganized. And hilum, it forms what hilum, and micropyle forms the micropyle of the seed. After the process of fertilization, the whole ovary changes into a fruit. So what is fruit? The fruit is defined as a ripened or a mature ovary. The wall of ovary may harden or may become fleshy and succulent fruit wall, which is known as pericarp, and the fruit contains 1 to many seeds. Now next is your significance of fruit. Actually, the formation of fruits has its own biological significance for the plants. First is your fruits protect the immature seeds from unfavorable climatic condition. As you all know that the seeds remain enclosed in the fruit until they are ready for germination. Now second significance is here, the mature fruit is brightly colored so that it can attract animals that help in dispersal of seeds. Now third is your immature fruits contain unpalatable and repelling substances such as tannin, bitter alkaloid and sour acids, etc. They provide chemical defense against the animals. Fruits have economic importance also, as many fruits form a part of our food. Moreover, many birds and other animals, they eat fruits as their food. Staple food of human beings consists of cereals, which are seeded dry fruits. Even a large number of fruits such as a ladyfinger, tomato, eggplant, pumpkin, cucumber, bitter gourd and bottle gourd, they all are used as vegetables. Fruits are a good source of vitamins, minerals, organic acids, pectin and sugars. Some fruits such as unripe fruits of papaver are used as medicines. Next is your seeds. The ovule develops rapidly after fertilization using the food reserves, and the mature ovule after fertilization is known as seed. The seed is covered from outside by hard and protective seed coat, and this seed coat develops from the integuments of ovule. The seeds contain a potential plant or embryo, and the embryo consists of tiny root and a small shoot. There are 1 or 2 food-laden cotyledons that provide nourishment to the developing embryo. Now next is your significance of seeds. Now what are the significance of seeds? The seeds, they help in development of new flowering plants, and they help in the dispersal of fixed plants. Third is they help in overcoming unfavorable conditions. Let's discuss question number 15 of this chapter, and your question is, what is the advantages of the following in the flower to the concerned plant? Now first is your different timings of maturation of androecium and gynoecium. It helps in cross pollination in the plant. Second is your large stamens with long filaments that hang outside the flower. And what is the advantage of these large filaments with large stamens with long filaments which hang outside the flower? That actually they help in wind pollination. Now third is your flowers with brightly colored petals. And what is the use of these brightly colored petals? They help to attract the insects for pollination. Next is your male and female flowers born on the same plant. If male and female flowers born on the same plant, then they help in self-pollination. Fifth is your petals scented with nectaries. The petals scented with nectaries help in the attraction of insects for pollination. Now next is your smooth and lightweight pollens. They help in wind pollination so that they can easily blown away by the wind and help in wind pollination. And last is your long and feathery stigma help in picking up the pollen grains and help in cross pollination.